Aaron, I think it's funny because here you are, and you're also in my intro. Haha. Isn't it funny how that works? Welcome, everyone. Sorry for the late start, technical difficulties. I have all of the technical knowledge of a flat earther, as you can clearly see. So, welcome back, Aaron.
Well, thank you very much. And what were we going to be talking about today?
So, last time we were on, which was a few weeks ago, you suggested we could do it, or we should do a talk on scientists promoting wacky ideas. So today we're not going to be talking about what we usually do, young earth creationists, intelligent design advocates, the flat earthers, those sorts of guys, the ones who don't really get a seat at the science table. No, today we're going to be talking about researchers, people who have the knowledge, the know-how in respected fields, and yet they're promoting wacky ideas anyway. Whether it be in science or pseudo-history, pseudo-archaeology, etc.
And well, so I had a slightly different take on the show when we talked about it before.
Well, we can do whatever. We got an hour, so we'll cover it all.
The slightly different take that I had was that we were going to be talking about scientists who did science badly.
That also works.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you suggested I get a handful of names together, and I have a handful of names together for people that need to be called out for doing science badly. Yeah, and so today we're not going to be talking about the people who pretend to be scientists and are doing everything they can to subvert science. The Mike Heathredger Adams or David Peters, or the people that are flooding the interwebs with their bogosity,
right,
and which end up clogging everybody's search engines with false information, which is a real problem.
Absolutely.
And the scientific community needs to do something about that bullshit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What do you do without infringing on free speech? To call out people when everything that they say is wrong. And they're all over the web with it. I mean, so any honest high school kid doing homework is going to do a little research online. He's not going to know that he's sourcing information from David Peters, some guy working out of his garage that has no expertise at all and is just making up shit. But his artwork looks really good, so it looks believable, right?
Oh yes, I have run into both reptile evolution and the pterosaur heresies, just on my own doing research for videos. Because if you look up anything dinosaur or diapsid or anapsid, odds are you're going to come across his artwork because he is polymathically prolific in his drawings. So.
Well, that's where he has a lot of time that other people would dedicate to loved ones. But anyway, so
yeah, there was there was also that guy Sylvia Zirkus, who was the one of the promoters of the Archaeoraptor thing, who's
Sylvia was the wife.
Or sorry,
yeah, I spoke to her.
What was the name of the guy?
I want to say David. I mentioned him in my book. Even when I went to his museum. Yeah. I was actually excited to meet him because I always loved their paleo art. I'd seen it a decade earlier and was very excited that I'm going to be in that area, so I'm going to go to their museum and see their artwork. And it is impeccable. It really is good.
Right.
But the guy did not want to meet me, and it's not just that he had to go out of his way to meet me in his own museum. I mean, he wanted to avoid me.
He was, well, I mean, you probably would have shown him, hey, what. This is wrong.
Well, yeah. Well, here's the thing. I didn't know that about him yet. All I knew was that he did this exquisite art. He made dinosaurs back before he did the feathered dromaeosaurs. He did a Deinonychus or Deinonychus, however you want to say it, that was just brilliantly lifelike, and it's Styracosaurus that was just amazing. I mean, just to walk amongst these things that I have to call animals, not sculptures, because they were so brilliantly lifelike. I mean, really, really talented artist. And so, I mean, I had contacted them a couple of times on the phone many years ago, and praised them for their work. and so, that I would love to come and see more if I ever get out to Utah. Well, there I am in Utah, and so I tell the guy that I'm coming out, and I'd love to meet him, get a picture with him, everything, and then he does. Not only is he not excited that I'm coming, which I'm not expecting somebody to fanboy over me. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying not only is he not happy of having a visitor who's looking forward to meeting him, he actually wants to avoid that. So he leaves. And so I'm a little, okay,
it's
fine.
weird.
You don't have to like me. You don't have to,
Yeah.
But why would he be that way? And then when I got to the museum, I finally got to see why. Because he is part of band. Birds
Yikes.
are not dinosaurs.
Yep.
And that is a group of people, including some scientists, Alan Fiducia, Larry Martin, and John Rubin, who made a pact back in the 80s. They what is the word when you make an agreement, like when religious people make an
I think pact's a pretty good word for it.
Yeah, it's probably pact, but they had agreed in the 80s that they were going to, future tense, reject and deny any and all evidence that would in the future ever be discovered that shows birds descending from dinosaurs. The fuck? So they don't even know what the evidence is yet, but they know they're going to reject and deny it. So they make this agreement with each other to do that. Why? How dishonest is that? I mean, like, only religion does that. Why the fuck would you? We're going to deny any evidence that ever surfaces rather than do the thing that science is all about doing, which is improving your understanding and finding out the flaws in your current perspective and correcting them. We're just going to hang on to the flaws we already have, that we know we have, because we know there's going to be more evidence indicating that birds are in fact dinosaurs. And we're going to deny all of that evidence when it comes in, because we already know we're wrong and we're determined to stay wrong. You can't be more anti-science than that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is pretty sad that they've taken that position, and some of the things that they propose as sort of their killer arguments for dinosaur bird evolution, such as like the frame or the movement of the fingers, have been resolved. It's the frame shift hypothesis. We've resolved most of these issues, and yet they're still clinging to this.
It's not. My whole issue is just it's exactly opposite of the way science works. And why is Alan Fiducia still working? I mean, absolutely every single article you find online from any source anywhere that says or implies that birds may not be directly descended from dinosaurs, all of those articles, every single one that you ever find, will have Rubin's or Fiducia's name on it. All of them.
Yeah.
Because the entire worldwide scientific community knows that birds are dinosaurs. And it's just this little religious group that's not technically religious. I think Fiducia is the only one that's actually a believer, but they're holding to a doctrine nonetheless that they need to defend a lie. Why?
Absolutely.
How come these people still have jobs? Why are they still in the scientific community? I mean, when you show that you have absolutely no ethics in your work at all, I would have thought in the ideal situation,
they probably have tenure.
When you do something that's openly dishonest, your reputation is shot and you're done. Your career is over. Why the fuck is he still working? Is he just working for creationists and that's it?
I think he's I think it's interesting because
covenant was the word I was looking for.
Covenant,
made a
sure.
covenant.
Yeah, that one works too. Yeah, that is a fair way to describe it. But it's, he's not a creationist himself, and he, is all for evolution and everything. And the creationists who cite him don't know that. And what's even funnier is he not only believes that birds aren't dinosaurs, but all of the dinosaurs that are too bird-like are actually birds. Like Velociraptor is a bird. Everything with feathers is a bird.
Yeah, and somehow the dinosaurs that we know as dinosaurs evolved from birds. in
Right.
their upside down, backward, head up your ass reality, which I didn't know about until I got to Zirkus Museum. So I'm wandering through the museum and I'm looking at this extraordinarily beautiful, really seriously beautiful artwork. And I turn and I look at this wall, and the wall has this huge mural on it, which is like the tree of life turned upside down on that one part. So you have the regular tree of life, and then the dinosaur part is upside down, where suddenly it's birds first and then dinosaurs. And that's when it suddenly hit me. Why Zirkus wanted to avoid me. Why Zirkus wanted to know when I would be here so that he could be elsewhere. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he didn't want me. He didn't want me to shit on his dream. You're harsh in my love, man.
You know, it's funny. I actually met Dr. Julia Clark at LSU Baton Rouge one time, and it was before I found out she was one of the people who debunked Archaeoraptor. I wish I'd known that when I met her, because I'll probably never meet her in person again, and that would have been my chance to be like, so what was it like seeing Archaeoraptor, you know?
There were so many things to love about Archaeoraptor. One, Zirkus, again, for those in the audience who do not know what these nerds are talking about. This guy, is it Steven Zirkus? I want to say Steven Zirkus instead of Dave. Am I remembering that right? And
that sounds familiar, because I think it's an S also. I think he is.
I think it's Steven Zirkus. What he did, which was just hysterical, was that he went to China, because he's not a paleontologist. He's a science aficionado, right? He loves paleontology, but he's not a paleontologist.
Right.
And I mean, in much the same way, really, as I am. I am a fan of the sciences. I don't have a degree in the sciences. I'm not working as a scientist, but I want to promote, and that's what he was doing as well. Unfortunately, he was promoting the head up your ass shit. But so what he did was he went to China, and he purchased an illegal fossil. There's a lot of people that were poor people in China that were finding fossils on their land, and they would just sell them to tourists. And it's illegal to do that, but they were doing it. And then when they find fractions of fossil, or not fractions, but fragmented fossils, they realize that if you can get a whole fossil, that's more expensive. You'll get more money. And so they put together two different fossils that were incomplete. They realized, well, we have a body here and we have a tail here. Why don't we just put them together? We can make it look real. And so they did a fair enough job that it would fool someone who wasn't trained in the sciences. And still, Steven Zirkus, just to let you know, and the guy's dead now, and I don't mean to speak ill of the dead and all, but fuck it, he was a fool. He paid $80,000 for this.
Yeah.
This $80,000. Imagine this. You're spending.
That's a little bit.
Yeah, you're spending like nearly $1,000 a month in financing this thing for the next 30 years for this piece of fucking rock you bought in China illegally. And then when he takes it to the scientist, he's very proudly showing it off. And the first scientist looks at it, says it's fake.
Yep.
First scientist looked at it. So he took it to somebody else. They said it was fake too. So he took it to a third person. They said it was fake. I think there was a half a dozen different scientists who all examined that fossil, and they all told him that it was two different fossils pieced together.
And National Geographic, I believe, also ran the story by a couple of different people, or a couple of different paleontologists, who all rejected it before they ran the actual story.
Total, between the people that Zirkus talked to and the people that National Geographic talked to, every it did not fool a single scientist. Now, the creationists will say, and have said, that fossil fooled the whole worldwide scientific community. No, not one person, not one scientist who ever looked at it. So you have this guy who puts his house in hock to buy this illegal fossil that is a composite, and then he gets turned down by every scientist. So he finds a backdoor in for National Geographic and convinces them to run the story anyway, even when all of the scientists are shitting on it. So National Geographic then runs this story, which has got to be the most embarrassing thing National Geographic has ever done. I realize there's some competition there, but I think this was the most embarrassing thing they ever did when they ran this story. But it's an even better thing. He didn't know at the time that, okay, so you have a body of Yanornis, I think. I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. A Cretaceous bird, big deal. It's just a bird. But then they gave it this Paraves or dromaeosaurid tail.
I think it was from Microraptor, wasn't it?
It was Microraptor.
Yeah.
Which was as yet undescribed. They didn't realize what Microraptor was. And so what did Microraptor turn out to be? Unfortunately, well, they named it stupidly. They named it before they knew what they had in their hands.
Right.
Because Microraptor had been predicted. A guy named...
By William Beebe.
Beebe, yes. Like in 1905 or 1915, something like that. William Beebe.
It was a ridiculously long time ago.
Yeah, it was 100 years before this fossil was found. He predicted it, and he named it Tetrapteryx because he noticed that Archaeopteryx had flight feathers on its legs.
Yep. Yes, he did.
And he noticed that Archaeopteryx's wings were undersized, meaning that it would be very difficult for Archaeopteryx to fly. So he predicted that there must have been another predecessor that would have had even shorter wings and bigger wings on the legs. So that it would have to be a 4-winged glider. That's what Microraptor turned out to be. It was the transition. It was a perfect Paraves transition. Every bit as good a transition as Archaeopteryx itself. And predicted 100 years ago. And I love when these things are predicted. We've got documentation of who predicted, how they described it, and it was in this year, and here's the year when it was fulfilled. What do you get from creationists? Well, you're never going to see new species evolve, and then we get a dozen of different examples of that. Well, you're never going to find a fossil with a half a wing, and then we get 100 different examples of that. That's what you get with creationists. They make predictions, and all the predictions are disproved, every one of them. It
is pretty amazing that Tetrapteryx or Microraptor was found, and it was predicted so long ago. Beebe made a couple of different predictions of different critters. He also predicted the Diarthrognathids, or Proboscideans, sorry, because of the way the jaw joint would have had to fit. And so, that's the exact opposite of how Alan Fiducia works in his team.
So Steven Zirkus would have done much better if he had just kept the part of the composite that he thought was worthless, because that's the valuable bit.
That was I think that would be a very fun way to bring up this fossil and a prediction of evolutionary biology, because they all talk about Archaeoraptor, but none of them talk about Microraptor because they don't understand the significance of it. And so that would be a very good way to sort of broach that topic.
It is really a fascinating story. It's amazing that we somehow both happened on Zirkus, I think you were the first one to mention Zirkus, and that just launched right into my list of bad scientists.
I have Fiducia on my list, and so I figured we would broach him at some point. He's just so prolifically wrong. It's hard to get away from him in terms of regular scientists who promote bad methodology. He's just kind of the poster child poster geriatric for that, because he's like 80 now. So
and one last thing about that. You've seen how people will have recently shifted from Fox News to Newsmax because they get angry that Fox News starts fact-checking what they want to believe. And so they want to go back to the people who only tell them what they want to hear, because that's what they want to hear. Right. And they don't ever want to hear what they don't want to hear. I've never understood that. I want to understand how shit is. Even if it's not something I want to believe. If it's real, then that's something I need to know about, right? I don't want to be fooled into believing anything that is not evidently true. Well, why?
When Fox News is too left for you.
All right. Yeah. So Steven Zirkus avoided me, knowing that I'm going to praise his artwork, right, and make a big deal about what great work he does, because he realizes I'm going to see that mural, and I'm going to correct him. And he doesn't want to be corrected. He wants to keep believing the stupid bullshit that he believes. The stupid bullshit that Alan Fiducia and John Rubin want to make believe, but they already know it isn't real, but they're going to believe it anyway. And so those two are the two most embarrassing scientists ever in scientific history.
I don't know. I've got another couple of good examples.
I have two, and they're probably the same ones.
It's a good bet we probably picked the same two. Who are yours?
But the fact that these two are so blatantly dishonest, where
Right.
I don't know, I can't find anybody else that was as bad. I'm wondering. Yeah, let's just go through the list. What are your two?
My next two that I have on my list are
You name one and I'll name the other. How's that?
okay. Fred Hoyle.
Ooh, he's not on my list, but he should have been.
Ooh. All right, who'd you get then? Who'd you get?
Fred Hoyle's a great choice, man. That's awesome. So Ernst Haeckel and Sir Richard Owen.
Okay. You were going like historical. Mine were Fred Hoyle and his accomplished Chandra Wickramasinghe as my next two. But Haeckel and Owen are very good examples.
Well, tell me more about Fred Hoyle.
Well, we all, as a lot of us in the creation evolution community have had to deal with, he is the creator of the horrendous tornado in a junkyard analogy,
Yep.
which was never intended for evolution. It was intended for abiogenesis on Earth, because Hoyle and Wickramasinghe are proponents of panspermia. And not just panspermia in the past, but panspermia is constantly happening, as in viruses are constantly falling to Earth, as well as octopus genes and various other things.
Octopus genes, coincidentally, leads to another name on my list. It was an obscure one from recent history, like 5 years ago.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that later. Fred Hoyle was irritating to me because he did provide creationists with so many creationist arguments, and his mindset was just so bizarre. I mean, he's an atheist,
right.
But he still advocated for intelligent design. You had to read between the lines to get what he's saying, that there has to be intelligence involved. Well, then to design this, he's advocating for intelligent design. He just doesn't use those words in that order. And he believed in creation because he believed in a continuous creation of new hydrogens out of nothing.
Right. Yeah, he was such a bizarre character, because he was I haven't read anything of his work in cosmology or mathematics, but I imagine he was probably a decent, mathematician, whatever. But I mean, good Lord, this idea that like solar flares, or when there are fewer solar flares, we're going to have more viruses falling to Earth, and genes for like space octopus and stuff like this. I mean, where on earth do you come up with these ideas?
Well, the thing I love about when I make a video, an edited video where I'm going to be refuting anything that was said by Fred Hoyle, I always make sure to include a photograph of the man. Because that's almost self-refuting. When you see a picture of Fred Hoyle, you're, oh, I get it now. He just looks befuddled and confused at his own shit.
Oh no, yeah, both of them kind of do. I mean, the crazy thing is, Wickramasinghe still publishes. Like, Hoyle's dead now, but Wickramasinghe still has people who will actually put their name as co-authors on a paper with him on space viruses. They will actually do this. And so, I mean, it's like, how on earth? Okay, first of all, if there's just one of you, that's one thing. But you got 12 other people to sign their names on this paper. How did you do that?
Space viruses. I have somehow not read anything about space viruses.
PZ has done a couple of videos on Wickramasinghe and his silliness. I'm sure he could tell you more about it, but that's the bit that I remember. But I mean, good Lord. I actually had a debate with a creationist who pulled the there were some evolutionists who said octopus fell from space.
Okay, well, that's going to tie right into my next one. Are we done with Fred Hoyle? Because I want to jump into my next guy.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, let's go.
Clifton Ragsdale is a recent one who got in that. He did not say any of this in the paper. He said all of this to the reporters. Okay, so it did not go in the peer review. It only went out on the what the wider audience reads, right? So I forget what the magazine was. Hold on, I've got it right here.
Okay.
It is Global Possibilities.
Global Possibility. That just sounds wrong.
Yeah, the article was scientists conclude octopus DNA is not of this world. Yeah. So Clifton Ragsdale said the octopus appears to be utterly different from all other animals, even other mollusks, with its 8 prehensile arms, its large brain, and its clever problem-solving abilities. And then he says the British zoologist Martin Wells said that the octopus is an alien. In this sense, then, our paper describes the first sequenced genome of an alien.
Oh, Christ.
Now, I get that you're a professional scientist, so maybe you are in that stereotype where you don't have like a lot of social skills. And maybe some things cause you to go that maybe shouldn't, right? But you're talking to an extremely gullible populace, people who are so mind-bendingly stupid that they believe that Tom Hanks is drinking baby blood in his satanic rituals.
Oh, we weren't supposed to tell them that.
All right,
we weren't supposed to tell them that.
Yeah. I just lost so much, faith in humanity when I see how dumb we can be. When you realize that Kenneth Copeland,
yeah,
became a billionaire doing the kind of performance that he does. That the fact that there are so many people, so many rubes who could be duped by him just leaves me thinking that we are doomed. We've lost the right to call ourselves man the wise.
Yeah, that's probably why. I imagine if aliens ever came across the internet, they would start scrolling and say, "We're done with this species. We're moving to the next one."
I would like to believe that there are aliens. I know that we had some very suspicious looking what seemed like microfossils in the Murchison chondrite and I think there was a couple of other rocks that said to come from Mars that seemed to have microfossils in them. Great promise, maybe. But we don't need to have panspermia happen someplace else. We know that virtually every part of the process has been verified on Earth already. So there's no reason for it to happen someplace. I mean, it may have happened many other places and probably did. But we don't need it to have happened someplace else and then come here, because it can just as easily emerge here.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think we've ever gotten enough proof of any kind of a microbe, certainly not enough to say that we have space viruses.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's funny, I actually read 2 books recently that were talking about panspermia. Well, not continual viruses dropping from space panspermia, but because they do actually attribute COVID as well as polio and other viruses that afflict the population to outer space. But I read 2 books recently.
Well, 60, 70 years ago, they would have blamed everything on the communists.
Hey, wait, they still do. But,
fluoridated water is a communist plot. I got that one from my family.
Oh, it's funny because I watched Dr. Strangelove, and I had to do research afterwards on some of the things they were talking about because the jokes are like like the fluorinated water thing. That was one of them. I was like, what? But I lost my train. Oh, so I read 2 books recently on that mentioned panspermia sort of as side tangents. And one of them was a book about fungi. It was titled Entangled Life by this guy named Merlin Sheldrake. And one of the things he talked about was how certain not molds, lichens could theoretically withstand meteoric impact, being like inside a meteor and landing on Earth, surviving the heat and the stress that would cause.
Yeah, I saw that
and
on
so, I mean,
a Stephen King movie called Creep Show. Did you see that?
Well, I did not. No.
It's a meteorite. Yeah, it hits the Earth, and Stephen King plays in this. He plays some kind of Ozark hillbilly, backwoods guy that wears nothing but overalls and bare feet.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds this meteor, and the thing is that the meteor has a kind of a moss growing in it, and the moss kind of gets on everything and consumes whatever it's on. So he becomes nothing but a shambling mound of moss. And then you see the entire countryside of it, all miles and miles around his house is all consumed by this green mossy shit.
I know there are some people who are sort of pro versions of panspermia, like maybe in the book, what's the name of the book? A New History of Life. They argue that maybe RNA started on Mars and then came here. I don't really buy that.
It doesn't need to, because we know that RNA can be self-catalyzed here. Right? Well, we know 3 or 4 different methods by which RNA.
I gotta let my cat out.
All right,
I'll be right back in 1 sec. Keep the audience busy with your juggling skills.
Keep the audience busy. Okay, well, we know of a handful of different processes by which we can come from inorganic chemicals to create organic chemistry to produce amino acids and so forth, and then from there's a number of other steps, completely different, unrelated chemical processes in different environments, oftentimes, that will go on to the next step, and then the next step, and the next step, and where we end up with RNA or ribonucleotides being created more or less on their own. So we don't need that to have come from outer space. We know of the different ways that it can happen here.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of really any version of panspermia, because it really just adds steps. It's like, okay, if you say life didn't start on Earth, that abiogenesis process started on Mars. Okay, well, now we have to go through another series of processes to get it from there to here and survive the upper atmosphere and all this other stuff. It's like, okay, no, we're just adding more steps. But yeah. Well, to get back to the scientists, you picked Haeckel and Owen. Would you like to talk about how they were doing some hinky things?
Yeah, starting with Haeckel, and I did a video on Haeckel because I thought it needed to be addressed. And the thing is that, and I'm kind of outing myself here, because once upon a time I was an airheaded art student, and so was he. And he made the transition from art in vocation. He made the transition from art to scientist. I mean, he became a professional scientist. And I'm very near to having my degree in anthropology. One fucking class away that I couldn't take this semester, so I have to wait a whole nother semester. I was supposed to be getting my degree weeks from now, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, that's it would be. It would be if I'd been able to get that one class in.
Well, I mean, you're just one away. That's nothing,
Yeah. Well, I would rather have it now and not have to wait till May over one class. Sure. But anyway. So Ernst Haeckel started out as an artist, and then he made a transition into science. And this was at a time when people were still figuring out what science is. And so he would come up with ideas and not present them the way that a scientist should. One of the things that I advocate all the time is that you don't want sensationalism. You want to be as dispassionate as possible with science. So exactly the opposite of religion. You know how religion always claims that whatever they speculate is absolute truth, and conclusively proven. All these statements you dare not ever make in science, because you ever talk like a religious person in a scientific field, you've ruined your credibility again. Right. So absolutely. That's exactly what he did. I mean, Ernst Haeckel was sincere in all of his work, except for this one thing where he had to draw these embryos. And he had a deadline where he had to have the book in by like noon tomorrow. And instead of
Right.
drawing instead of drawing separate drawings for these 2 or 3 different species, he realized that they all look practically the same. So he used the same drawing for 2 of them. And that was only in the first edition. And somebody called him out on it and said, well, you can't do this. Well, he said they look the same at that stage anyway, which they do.
They do. Yeah, they pretty much do. Yeah.
If you talk about it in terms of developmental stages instead of weeks of development, because the gestation periods are different, then he's exactly right. They do. And that was only on the first edition, and all subsequent editions were completely correct. But that utterly destroyed his career. The other thing that he did was he came perilously close to an actual law, which eventually went over to Carl Ernst von Baer. And when
Yes.
Carl Ernst von Baer rephrased it, it lost all of its oomph. But Ernst Haeckel had phrased it very, very poetically. He said, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. Beautifully put. The only problem with that is that his description of what that means included a couple of flaws. He said that evolutionary patterns are emulated in the embryology of developing organisms, which they in fact are. If you can compare the fossil record, and you can compare, development of embryos, and there is a correlation there, but only with the embryos of the organisms.
Yes.
They do not go through, and this is what he stipulated. He said they go through their adult stages, that they become fish and then amphibians and then reptiles, which all of that is showing that, hey, he's in the 19th century. He doesn't really understand what we're going to understand about taxonomy in another 100 years or so. Yeah. So he put in 2 errors in his law, and consequently, his law was then refuted. The beautifully poetic little catchphrase that we can put on T-shirts and bumper stickers becomes refuted. Carl Ernst von Baer corrects it, takes out the 2 errors. He's got the correct law, but he can't use the poetic phrasing anymore. So Haeckel was so very close to something great.
Yeah.
And overstepped and screwed it up. I mean, it's like when you post something and you put out all this information and it's really good, but it's got 1 or 2 actual errors in it. Because I can tell you from personal experience, you get anything wrong and your own side will chew you up over that. So, and you may not even know you may not even know to suspect something. I quoted something where, Voltaire said this, and a Christian apologist both agreed on this same fact. I'm like, okay, well, if both of these people agree that this is the thing, then this must be the thing. But it turned out, no, both of them made exactly the same error, even though they're both famous. And fucking Voltaire, right? So you never know. You got to fact check everything, including the stuff you already fact checked.
Right. Yeah. It's I do think that is a bonus, because watching creationist videos, and I know we don't want to get stuck on the creationists, but you don't see that. You just don't. But for our side, you do, and sometimes it's actually a little daunting, because when I make a script, I run it by several people. I have several people who fact check my scripts before making them into the video, and that can be a little daunting, because I have to read a bunch of papers, do a load of research and make sure, okay, I'm pretty sure I have an understanding of this topic before I run it by these guys so they don't think I'm an idiot, or something.
Yeah, and then the thing that turns out to be wrong might be something that you never even suspected. You've got no reason to doubt this little insignificant factoid, and that's the thing that unravels the whole rest of your production, because that's what happens when you're writing for actual scientists, or to promote actual science. Whereas with the creationists, and I can, both of us know this from personal experience, they can be absolutely wrong about absolutely everything, and knowingly lying their asses off all the way through, and absolutely does not make any difference to them. They're going to do another 1,500 videos just like that one, repeating the same shit that they now know is wrong.
Right. Yeah. That is very true. Your other example, Oh, you did also mention Haeckel, I believe, in one of your foundational falsehoods videos. But also, Owen, you gave a very good description of Owen's problems in your foundational falsehoods book. I thought
Yeah,
you did
well,
a very good
before you get
job of that.
onto that, because you mentioned that I
Oh,
mentioned
sorry.
Haeckel in another book, it needs to be said that Haeckel did that he made those two mistakes, and now he's going to catch shit for a mistake he didn't make. So he did a number of photographs for different embryos, and he said in his book that he removed all of the maternal material so that you're just looking at the embryo.
Oh,
and
yes.
he made them all the same size and given the same orientation. They're all facing the same way, and he did this for ease of comparison, right? And he said so.
Yes.
So then some people later on, like 15 years ago or so, decided that they're going to attack him because who's going to defend his credibility now?
The fraud rediscovered paper. Yeah, I remember that one.
So now they do a number of different embryos, and they're facing different ways, or they're at different angles, and they're at different sizes, and some of them include the yolk, and some of them don't.
Right.
So they show the embryos, they're looking different directions, and one of them has a yolk on it, and they say, well, see how different they are? Yeah, we see what you did deceptively to make it look like that.
Yes, I remember that paper. Yeah, that was sad. The funny thing is, when you look at the embryos,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I actually agree with what you're about to say, but I was just going to say when if you actually look at embryos, because we raised some tadpoles, and if you look at them, take a little magnifying glass, you look at them, it looks like what you think of as like the archetypal chordate or vertebrate. They're little embryos in the egg. They're clear eggs. Yep. Look just like that, just like what you see in the textbooks.
Yep. So when he did these drawings,
it's amazing.
He did his drawings, and his drawings got included in the books. Even after he had done a drawing different from, for the human, for the dog is no longer using the same picture anymore. He's got different drawings for each of those. The creationists will still say that it's fraudulent. And more amusing than that is when they replaced those drawings with microphotographs. The creationists are complaining still. They're photographs. Haeckel had nothing to do with it. These are fucking photos. What the hell are you bitching about?
Yes.
The thing they're bitching about is that they don't want to get fact-checked. They want to believe the fantasy they bought. They don't want anybody coming along and ruining it. It's like they're watching a magic show and they don't want you to tell them how it's done. It really is a lot like that.
Yeah. It's funny you mention that because RJ and I we discussed the Haeckel embryos in our book, The Rocks Are There, and we talked about how Casey Luskin,
oh yes,
if for anyone
very punchable face, that one.
Well, for anyone who doesn't know, Casey Luskin is one of the fellows of the Intelligent Design Discovery Institute. On his side, he was complaining about textbooks that had pictures of embryos or drawings of the pictures of the embryos, and he was complaining that they were too much like Haeckel's. Well, sorry that a picture looks like Haeckel's drawing.
Yeah, that a photograph looks like a drawing is probably a compliment to the drawing.
Yeah, it was so funny because Elizabeth Mitchell over at AIG was doing the same thing. They're like, oh, we're giving these textbooks who have Haeckel. They said Haeckel embryos or Haeckel-like embryos, or give them an F. Well, Haeckel-like embryo apparently contained anything from drawings of pictures to actual pictures. So there's no winning, I guess.
So on to the last one. Is there still one more after that? But on to Sir Richard Owen.
Oh, I've got a whole bunch of guys on here.
All right. Well, then you do the next one.
Okay. Bye. After Owen.
Okay. After Owen. All right. So I was taught early on that we were supposed to revere Sir Richard Owen. It's Sir Richard Owen. Mm-hmm. I mean, he built the Natural History Museum in London. It's like the most magnificent building I've ever seen. I absolutely love that building. He created that. He basically founded the Royal Society. He was the foremost expert in the world on paleontology.
Yes.
Once Cuvier died, that was it. It was Sir Richard Owen. I had no idea that he was a creationist,
Mm-hmm.
and I had no idea how dark and malevolent and manipulative and just summarize evil he was. And you have to find that in snippets in going through his biography. So I'm researching, some things that I'm going to write about Owen, and I just start finding these little tidbits about how he happened across a rival. I think it's the same guy, Mandel, whose wife discovered the iguanodon teeth.
Okay.
But so he had a spinal problem, and Owen and this guy Mandel, Owen didn't like him, so Owen managed to get a hold of this guy's corpse when he died and put his spine on display in the museum.
Oh my God!
Yeah, this is an act of disrespect. He used to write under an assumed name to praise himself while criticizing all of his rivals. He knew that Darwin had predicted that if dinosaurs had descended from, or if birds had descended from dinosaurs, then we should find a fossil of a bird with unfused wing fingers. And 2 years later, they found Archaeopteryx, which was exactly that.
Right.
And so Owen studies that and says that the predicted trait was unimportant. That's it. You're just going to dismiss it. It's just a bird, he said. And then he went on, because Richard Owen had this weird religious thing where his God was a tinkerer. He didn't believe in the God of Genesis. He believed in a different God, one that learned from his mistakes. So his God would make a line of models, and then in the next year he would come out with a new line, new and improved. And so when the dinosaurs wore out, he replaced them with mammals. That was Sir Richard Owen's religious conviction. And he had another one. He was convinced that warm-blooded meant that you were caring, and cold-blooded meant you didn't give a shit. They were just a heartless murderer. So when all the evidence started flooding in to show that dinosaurs were actually warm-blooded, he started freaking, because he can't have a transition from cold-blooded to warm-blooded. That wasn't possible. God has to end that series and come out with a new line. And so he started lying about these things. He argued on the thing about birds coming from dinosaurs. He argued instead, a straw man, publicly, that birds could not have descended from pterosaurs, which wasn't even the argument. But he publishes this huge paper, knowingly fraudulent. It's deliberately deceptive. And then he lied about trying to cover up human evolution. He said that humans had or that other apes had a part of the brain that humans don't have. And so this was the distinguishing feature. They have this other brain element. Humans don't have it. So therefore we can't be related. And then he was called out, indicted for perjury. And that on top of a whole list of other things, because he was an insidious, evil fuck, eventually got him kicked out of the Royal Society. Sir Richard Owen, who should rightly be remembered for all of the great contributions he actually made. Right. But the older he got, the more evil he became. If that makes any sense?
Yeah. No, it's amazing because, this is the guy who came up with the term dinosaurs, but also this is the guy whose descriptions of the fossils that Darwin found in South America, because prior to Darwin going to South America, only 2 fossil mammals were known from there. Darwin came back with like 8 more or something like that. It was a large number. And Owen described all of these, and Darwin used these fossils to argue for evolution and origin just a few years later.
So Darwin becomes this world-famous naturalist, like one of the most celebrated figures in history. And he's a nobody. He's just a rich kid who went on a cruise. He wasn't supposed to be, he was supposed to be trained to be a minister, He was
Right.
supposed to be a clergyman, and then he was supposed to be a doctor, but he didn't have the gut to do it, right? He got sick in an operating room because, this was in a time before anesthetic. Right. And you watch people perform surgery on children when they don't have anesthetic. That'd be a hard thing to sit through. So he didn't want to sit through that. So his father, I think, got him on this, somehow, I can't remember how he got on the cruise. But it did have to do with him being...
Or he was friends with Adam Sedgwick, and Sedgwick said, "Hey, I know a guy who's about to go on a cruise."
Yeah, so he ends up on this cruise, which is actually a brilliant thing, and it cost him his health for the rest of his life, but it also gave him his fame ultimately. But he wasn't supposed to be the great being that he ended up being. That was supposed to be Richard Owen's position. That's what he was supposed to be. And so the weird thing is that these two become rivals. Owen has all of the expertise. Owen has all of the power. Owen has all of the prestige. He has the precedence. He has everything. He's established and educated and all of that. And he ends up being Darwin's greatest enemy and his boss.
Yeah.
It's like Tesla, and I understand there was another inventor that Tesla was working for who invented a light bulb, who didn't really invent a light bulb but said he did. What was that guy's name?
Edison.
Exactly. It's a story very like that.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very sad that someone who was so prestigious and had so much knowledge would do this because of theological convictions.
Yeah.
But,
and so it's not that we don't know that there are scientists like this. I mean, importantly, I didn't bother looking up their names, but we know that the oil companies had hired scientists to testify for them when they knew what leaded gasoline was doing in Los Angeles, what leaded gasoline was doing to the environment and to all living things, period. They knew. And so they hired somebody to lie to them. So somebody had so little ethics that he knew that we are poisoning absolutely everything, and we're just going to keep doing that because it makes us money. That's insidious. That's evil. And then there was somebody else doing exactly the same thing with cigarettes.
Yep.
So again, we know for a fact that cigarettes are causing this damage. And so we hire a scientist who will lie in court to say it's not happening. So we know that scientists, just because you're a scientist doesn't mean you have noble aspirations or any of that. I'm sorry to say. I am slightly outside of the scientific community in that I don't have that degree yet. I'm not working in that field. But I always held science to an ideal that you don't ever make a mistake. If you do, you own it immediately. The guy who was running, and again, I can't remember. I can't believe I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Any other day, and I probably would have it. He was running the American Museum of Natural History. He discovered what was later just called Nebraska Man.
Oh, Osborne.
Previously, his skepticism held him in good stead. When he got the fossils for what was eventually named Piltdown Man, he refused to show it as Piltdown Man. That went on display in his museum as a mixture of human and ape bones. He correctly identified on site what that was. Full cred to him. But when he found what turned out to be a badly worn pig's tooth, and then made the assertion that he thought it was an ape, you have to be a little hesitant. You showed great skepticism early on with Piltdown Man, and then you fuck up with Nebraska Man. And it ultimately meant that he criticized the newspaper that published the story about Piltdown Man. He criticized all of the sensationalism that grew up around it. Again, did not fool one scientist, not one. I read all these reports from all these different scientists where everybody was chewing his ass for saying, you found a tooth and you think that means ape, or worse, you think you found an ape's tooth and you might be an ape's tooth and you think it's human. We need more evidence than that.
Right.
The entire everybody who wrote about that criticized him that way.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. He had to own up to that. Oof.
On that point, I want to go to my last person, and we'll just spend the rest of the night on your list.
Okay.
my, my last person is Felisa Wolf Simon. And what she did was, I want to say about 8 years ago, she comes up with a story that she goes to Mono Lake in Southern California, and there's a very, very high arsenic content. And so she finds the lake is completely poisonous, and she finds a microbe that is capable of living in that lake. And of course, you're going to find things that are tolerant. There's a lot of microbes that are tolerant to conditions that would be considered poisonous for for higher life forms. So she finds a microbe that's sustaining in this lake, and she declares that it has replaced sulfur. Is it sulfur? I don't know. She thinks that it's replaced one of the components in its DNA.
Well, sulfur is in your amino acids.
Yeah, well, I don't know why I said sulfur. As soon as I said it, it's wrong. But they were. I don't know why I can't think of the word right now. So embarrassing. But she thinks that these microbes replace this one element, this one like codon with arsenic. And I think it was a codon. Do you remember the story?
I remember it was some aspect of its DNA that was claimed to be or to have arsenic, at least in part.
Yeah, I don't know why I said sulfur, but as soon as I did, I realized it was wrong.
There's like phosphorus, oxygen, carbon, hydrogen.
Maybe it was maybe it was phosphorus. But anyway, she comes up with this, and so again, you don't ever want to get your new news about science from news about science. Really ever. Because every time I read these stories about what scientists have discovered, the reporters are always embellishing shit. And as we've already seen with Clifton Ragsdale, sometimes the scientists are embellishing shit, and the reporters don't know. Right? So the reporters write that octopuses are from outer space. So she wrote that this thing has DNA that is unlike any other life form on the planet. That it was, as in, not coming from the same source of DNA as everything else on the planet. So they declared in the news story, not in the original scientific report, they were declared in the news story that this organism in Mono Lake was a product of a unrelated abiogenesis event.
Yeah.
In a lake.
Ridiculous.
In a lake.
Right.
If there was multiple abiogenesis events, and I don't even want to try to go into the wealth of detail of what an abiogenesis event is, because it's actually not a single event, it's a whole bunch of them. But if you had completely different, unrelated organisms, they had to have been here millions of years ago as well, billions of years ago, more likely. So it's not going to only exist in a lake.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
No matter what.
And if it's a microbe, it's going to be all over the place.
Exactly. Yeah. So what ended up happening was shortly after that. I mean, so she says that they put arsenic in the DNA, that somehow this organism is using arsenic instead of, I guess it was phosphorus, in its DNA. And then when I saw that, I started looking up other sources trying to fact check that, and then I realized that the other scientists are questioning whether she had legitimacy to make that claim. And you don't have to disprove what I believe. It's enough that you show me that I don't have sufficient reason to believe it. If you don't have sufficient reason to believe it, you shouldn't believe it.
Right.
So she's making a claim. She doesn't have sufficient evidence to back that claim. So then there's a subsequent article came out later where they are tearing her up for having made this claim, and they can't duplicate it because the peer review process is ruthless. That means that other people want to do the same thing, and if they can't prove that you're right, you're wrong. So then she comes up with a statement that says that all of her research still backs what she said. I love this kind of defensive attitude, that all her studies still back her. It doesn't matter that the entire scientific community is thumping their feet at her, and they say, we are not showing what you said in your experiments. When we do those same experiments, the same thing doesn't happen. So she's like, my studies still support what I said, and I'm sure I'll know a lot more in the next year or two. That was in 2012.
Seems like. Yeah.
It maybe
goodness.
was. Is it because she was young? Is it because she got excited by what she thought she found? Again, you need to be dispassionate.
Right. I mean, yeah, if you found a separate abiogenesis event, you'd probably be the most popular science person like ever. But
yeah, but even if she found just the thing that she said, because remember that was that's what the news article, that's what the reporters said about it, not what the scientists said about it, but what she said about it. It's integrating arsenic into its DNA. She didn't have sufficient reason to say that, and because she got excited, maybe about a great discovery, an ambitious, aspiring scientist, young, just recent into the field, discovers something really wonderful like that. Sometimes it's hard to question your own biases or recognize that you have them, but if you don't, you'll do like her and ruin your entire career, so that for the rest of your life, your credibility is shot to hell.
Right.
Why don't creation scientists ever have this problem?
Well, I think we know why they don't have this problem. It rhymes with honey, But
yeah.
Yeah, this sensationalism of the news is pretty terrible. The same thing happened for Darwinius Massillé when it was first unveiled.
Oh my, yes.
Yeah,
who was that Norwegian guy that they got to do the? I forget the name of that guy, but it's like, can you sex this up anymore? And then they had
we found the missing link.
They had David Attenborough shitting on his own reputation with some of the shit that he said about that. I don't know. Did they give him a bogus description? Because I mean, Attenborough's, again, he's not a professional scientist.
Right.
He's a brilliant science communicator, among the best there probably will ever be.
Sure.
But I held my face in my hands when I saw him talking about Darwinius Massillé. I'm like, oh my God, shut up.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. He's like a nature conservationist kind of guy. He's not a paleontologist. And so he was probably like, here's something big in the news. I can communicate the significance of this finding to my audience.
And unfortunately, he's saying exactly what that Norwegian paleontologist told him to say. And you don't question the expert, right? If you're not an expert yourself. There's another thing creationists don't understand. I don't know dick about jack about this subject, but that means that I know better than all the world's best educated expert specialists in any field ever.
Oh yeah, that's pretty regular. I'm in a whole group of people who
I had to make a video about
this.
On that note, Aron, we do have someone in the side chat who just claimed that bombardier beetles breathe fire through their ass. Just say.
Is this Dwayne Gish's ghost? Has he returned to us?
Just wanted to bring that up.
Is that the guy? Is that the Stones guy? We don't.
Yep.
If he wants to talk afterwards, I'd be happy to talk to him, but he's not coming on this.
Somebody believes in Dr. Javier Cabrera.
Yep.
And his bogus Ica stones that he paid people to carve for him, and then literally bathed those rocks in chicken shit to artificially age them.
Yep. That's the one.
When even Answers in Genesis admits that that's a fraud, it's a fraud.
I think the only person who still even backs it is like Kent Hovind and Ian Juby. I think that's it. That's the entire list of people.
And there's another one, and I forgot his name. He was on Hovind's what was it, boot camp? The guy
Carl Baugh?
No. There's another one.
I don't know.
Short stocky guy. I'll have to look that up.
I almost met Carl Baugh. We were standing very close to each other, and I could have met him, but I didn't want to.
He probably would have run. I mean, I know how tall you are, Aron.
I recognized him, but I realized it would be really awkward if I said any. I didn't want to get a because the guy's a crook.
Yes,
he's just a fraud and a scammer. I thought it would be funny to get a picture with him, but I'm not going to get a picture with him because he's reprehensible. He's scum. And it also happened to be that I was with at that time. I'm touring his museum with a friend of mine who also happened to be the founder.
Oh, his double wide trailer.
No. I was with a friend of mine touring this guy's facility, and my friend was the founder of the Church of the Subgenius. I was with Ivan Stang, founder of the Church of Bob.
Church of Bob.
And I did not want to get Ivan Stang and Carl Baugh in the same picture. Although there's a certain bit of greatness in that.
Yeah. Oh goodness. Yikes. Oof. I've never I've never met any professional creationists. I've talked to like some street preachers, but that's about it. Everyone else I've talked to about young earth creationism has been through the interwebs.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't really meet them either. I mean, I stood next to Ken Ham and got a picture with him, and I'm on film walking beside him in a documentary where he's walking along talking to Bill Nye, and then you see when Ken Ham turns and sees me, because he had already said some shit about me that I found out through Australian news, of all things. He said something to his congregation about telling his congregation to pray for me. And I find out about that by somebody sent me a link from Australian news. Why Australian news? I don't know. So he knows who I am.
Right.
And he's walking through. We got all these movie cameras around. And he's talking to Bill Nye, and he looks over and he sees me walking right next to him. And you see him do this. And that's in the movie.
He's a security. No.
You can tell right when he recognized me.
Oh my goodness. That's pretty funny. I don't have, well, I mean, I have a few people, but we're kind of like right at the hour mark now. So I'll go quickly through the people that I got just so we can kind of.
I'm sorry. I did not mean to drag this out.
Oh, no, it's fine. Well, we started late, remember? So,
okay. Well, then we still have another 20 minutes.
Something like that. Yeah. I want to ask if you've heard of some of these guys. You may have. I don't know. They're kind of niche. The first one I have on my list is Eugene McCarthy, not the senator. He's an anthropologist.
I don't think I do.
Well, he is the founder of the hypothesis that humans are the result of an interbreeding event between a chimpanzee and a pig. Yes, a male pig and a female chimpanzee. That is his hypothesis for our hairlessness.
So God tells his angels that he's going to make a new creation, and it's going to have the body of an ape and the skin of a pig.
Yes.
And the voice of a parrot and the brain of a dolphin. And he will be my greatest creation, and he will destroy everything else I've created. And the angels all applaud confusingly.
Basically, that's yeah. I mean, it's wild. You know, PZ and Donald Prothero went up against him years ago, back when he first started making these claims. But it's like, how do you argue with an anthropologist who has no understanding of anthropology? How does that work?
Back in the day, we used to get into an argument with this guy who insisted that humans had been on the planet for 220 million years because he insisted that he found human bones in anthracite coal veins. And he would find these things that he thought looked vaguely bone-like, and he would have them carbon dated, which is funny because it's just carbon. It's coal.
Right.
It's just
well, there are things that can get. Or no, that's not coal. That's the mineral concretions. They're like some of the objects that creationists like to push. It's like they'll be under a dripping stalactite, and they'll get completely covered in like the crystal
Silicate.
or whatever. And
It's a
creationists will
silicate
claim it's
concretion.
old.
I saw one with a hammer and another one
Yeah,
with a
right.
boot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this guy was saying that he would take
kind of
these
stuff.
bone-like coal things, anthracite coal, and he would have them go tested, and it was always that people were part of the conspiracy as to why they kept telling him that this is coal, not bone. How do you argue when it's all part of the conspiracy? It's like if you were to take a flat earther. If you were to take a flat earther onto when they say that you can't go to the Antarctic and you take them to the Antarctic, then they become part of the conspiracy, right? Especially if you take them up in a space shuttle, right? Or space, right? So you take them up into orbit, so then now they can see. You see the curvature of the Earth? I mean, you're looking at the whole fucking thing at once, right? and you're weightless.
Yeah.
Kind of a hard trick to pull, right? But then that person, his word has no credence in his own flat Earth market because he's now bought into the conspiracy. So if you want to deny reality,
right,
you have limitless ways to do that.
I mean, it's kind of going on right now because you have the conspiracy theories both being pushed simultaneously. That one, Joe Biden can barely form cohesive sentences. And the other, that he has masterminded the greatest scheme in like the history of American politics. So, which is it? Which has he done?
Yeah, and I like that. I recently posted about this that Joe Biden is definitely on the political right. Right, he's on the right wing of the political compass. Everybody knows that. Every source says so. Why if your news source is telling you that he's a radical leftist and that he's promoting socialism, then your news is the fake news.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of
because there isn't silly. A leftist in the world who would say the leftists who voted for Biden admit that he is not on the left where we would like him to be. He's just not.
Yeah, it's silly. It's just so silly. But so I thought you might find that one funny. That was so that was Eugene McCarthy, the anthropologist. I actually mentioned him once to Dr. Amanda Glaze, and she just kind of rolled her eyes. Or I mentioned his name, and she immediately recognized him and rolled her eyes, and I was like, "What?" She's like, "He's just one guy." But yeah, I guess
one guy,
right.
As we've said, can do an awful lot of damage.
That's true.
I mean, David Peters, that other guy, the health ranger, and where they just spread their seed all over the internet, and then they end up confusing anybody that's trying to do honest research.
Yeah, I do want to say I love Dr. Amanda Glaze. She's awesome. Very wonderful person to talk to.
There's another guy named Greg Braden who I'd like to take on. Yeah, he tries to make himself very fashionable, and he's all advocating woo while criticizing science. But it's the way that he does it makes it difficult to do a rebuttal video because it's not fluid like the way other people do, where you just lie, and you could just cut after every lie.
Sure.
It's like sometimes he says things that are true, but he says things that are true in a deceptive way, like that. Did you know that Darwin, the original title for Darwin's, or the original subtitle for Darwin's Origin of the Species, was The Preservation for Favored Races? And then move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah, that technically that's right. He was talking about races of cabbages.
Yeah. But that's another conversation. There is technical literature. There are papers by like historians and geneticists that talk about what race meant in Darwin's day. There are whole papers on that. And it's just fascinating that they will not look at any of these papers.
Yeah, the 50th episode of my systematic classification of life, the final episode, was talking about what race means in the social construct that it is now, and in the scientific application that it was then. And all I get is people that they only know the social version that they've been taught, and they think it's scientific. and they're not going to be reasoned with about that, probably because it supports the racism that they still cling to.
Right.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there were some racist aspects. Funny enough, to young Earth creationism. George McCready Price and some of the early people involved in modern young Earth creationism were kind of racist. So, and they wrote about that. So
yeah,
that would
and strangely, Darwin was not. Darwin gets a real bad deal here when people accuse him of being racist and saying that Hitler was a Darwinist, when neither one of those is remotely true.
I mean, we would be fair if we were judging Darwin by our modern standards, we would be fair in saying he was, by our modern standards, racist. But by his own standard, by his current day standards, he was extremely progressive. Right.
I don't think that he was racist by any standard. I mean, he always advocated for indigenous people. He pointed out the biases that, had this behavior been seen in a white woman, it would be considered virtuous, but because it wasn't in a white woman, well, now we consider it criminal. Right. Well, he constantly cited that kind of stuff.
I mean, yeah, I would say like a Descent of Man, for instance, it depends
on where you're reading, because in Descent of Man, there's an evolution in his thinking, right? He starts with the ubiquitous language where you have the concept of higher and lower life forms, and he's repeating what they believe since Linnaeus's day.
Right.
But by the end of the book, he's recanting all the shit he said in the beginning of the book.
It's not so much that it's more of the development of society, I guess I should say. Not like that the races are not equally evolved, because he recognizes that all modern people are equally evolved. Every extant organism is equally evolved, right?
Well, he also argued that the idea that he was the first. He was the first to argue that there is no race. I mean, there's only one human race, period. That he says
right, yeah, he was
not a
monogynist, right?
Yeah,
right. He was advocating for monogamy rather than polygyny, but that civilization evolves sort of unidirectionally from savage to England, right? Basically, and so that you will always go towards that ideal of Western society, ultimately, which, I mean, that's not his fault per se. That was a common belief in his day, but I mean, not that it really matters anyway, because as we talked about, he was talking about races of cabbage, not really races of people. Origin doesn't even talk about people.
What surprises me about Darwin is that he had every reason to be just as bad as the believers want to say he is.
Correct.
Right. That he came from a period of English history where they were absolutely ethnocentric, where they were every bit as arrogant as Americans are today.
Right.
The sun never sets in the British Empire. Right. They were the greatest and the best of all people. They owned and controlled everything. The British was the highest of all society.
Right.
And he's rich. So he's a snot-nosed brat in this ethnocentric empire and all of that. And yet he still ends up advocating for the indigenous people and the injustices that are being visited upon them by his own people. Over and over and over again, he's talking about what an injustice that is.
Right.
And of course, we can imagine the kind of women that he spent his life looking at, the way that people dressed in Great Britain in the mid 1800s, and then he goes to Tahiti, where they're all topless, and he writes that that the British should prefer the dark skin of Tahitians to their own comparative pallor. Because we have a boy who's like 23 years old at the time, who is on this island where they're wearing grass skirts and nothing else. Right. And the 23-year-old boy is going, titties.
Right. Yeah. He's like, I've been on this ship for a long time.
So the way he writes gives the impression that he prefers dark meat.
Well, I think I don't know. He seemed to prefer a shallower gene pool. But
Yeah, eventually, yeah. So, cousin wife, shall we
Go
move to
ask your
Alabama?
aunt. Go ask your aunt. I mean, your mom, right? Yeah. Oh goodness. Yeah. If anyone hasn't read it, highly recommend Voyage of the Beagle, which is Darwin's Journal of Researches, which was the original title of it.
Yeah, his least known and possibly greatest work. In
It's
some
fantastic.
respect.
It is fantastic. I think the other book that was like fantastic. I mean, aside of course from Origin and Descent, was his book on coral reefs, because he founded the modern theory of coral reef formation. So,
He was the one that wrote about the atolls.
yes, yeah. He corrected Lyell, because Lyell had a sort of reverse idea of how coral reefs and atolls form, and Darwin said, "No, it's not. It's not a volcano going up. It's a volcano going down." And so there you go. Yeah, and so that was Darwin.
Yeah. I liked the way. Now I would say that Darwin was not perfect, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he was not the racist that people paint him out to be.
Correct.
He was actually one of the most progressive thinkers of his time. Now, that doesn't matter to the theory that he wrote. He could have been a completely vindictive, horrible, diseased kitty fucker, and his disease would have still been, and what he wrote about, what he observed in nature would still be correct. But fortunately, as it happened,
right,
he was actually a pretty decent guy, and got a lot more bad press than he ever deserved.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. I want to mention another guy, or another couple of guys. Here is, have you ever heard of Carlton S. Kuhn?
No.
He's an anthropologist, so another anthropologist.
How is he spelling the name?
Coon. Okay,
then no.
Kuhn is a proponent of Bigfoot. An anthropologist who promotes the study of Bigfoot. You had Erica on your channel of Gutsick Gibbon, and she was the first person to point me to this person.
I'm sure that you probably already know that. I mean, I believed in Bigfoot right up until I was him.
Oh my goodness!
And if you don't know that story, I'm not telling it tonight. Somebody can point you to it somewhere else.
Yeah, it's interesting. The idea of Bigfoot is kind of an appealing one, because in theory, there's nothing preventing a population of apes from living in like the woods of California, or Oregon, where that the video was filmed. The famous video of the Bigfoot walking through the woods was filmed, but in theory, there's nothing stopping a population of apes from living out there. There's just no evidence that they do.
Technically, there's nothing stopping the idea of the abominable snowman, the
Sure.
Yeti.
Right.
So the Asian version of that would be perfectly fine. But the one in the Pacific Northwest, how did it get here?
Well, that would be, I guess, the only one I would say would be maybe crossing the Bering Strait land bridge while it was available. But
yeah, but you can't do that just without provisions.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, well,
most of the stuff that we have here that came from Europe came over the other direction, and so maybe if we could have if cheetahs and cougars can be as closely related to as they are, as jaguars and leopards are as closely related as they are, then yeah, we could have a Sasquatch, I guess.
I mean, I don't buy it, but I think it's kind of interesting. So it's kind of funny that there is like a professional anthropologist out there who's like, yeah, Bigfoot probably out there. It's like, really?
Yeah.
I mean,
you know how difficult it would be. Now, it's one thing in the 1800s,
sure,
or in the 1700s, when Carolus Linnaeus, for example, when he was writing about chimpanzees and orangutans, he didn't know that gorillas existed.
Right.
Most people didn't know. How And it's amazing that people could go through the 1700s and not know that there are gorillas. Or that if anybody ever saw a gorilla, they thought they were looking at a chimpanzee, I guess.
I think some of them, they thought they were people. They thought they were like people who lived in the trees who would steal other people. Wasn't that their...
No, gorillas are too big for trees, though.
Or it was, I believe it was, or that was part of the mythos of it, is that
Carolus Linnaeus classified the orangutans as Homo nocturnus.
Right.
Which today we reserve for vampires. And he classified chimpanzees as Homo troglodytes, but he didn't know about gorillas. And it's funny to me that the gorillas were discovered so recently. I mean, like in the 1800s or early 1800s. How is that possible that they didn't know that there were gorillas?
Yeah.
But now imagine that we have something similar, only it's even bigger. And it's in a vastly more populated area.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And we still don't know about it centuries later.
Yeah, it's it'd be nice. It'd be nice if it were I mean, well, I don't know. An ape that could punch out an elephant is kind of a scary thought, but
they had that. They had that. It's just that it was in Asia.
Yeah. But if it were living in the woods of Northern California.
For those who don't know, Gigantopithecus was an orangutan relative, but way bigger than any gorilla now. So imagine an orangutan the size of Mighty Joe Young. And yes, it's capable of punching out an elephant.
Yeah, that would be something, but probably not. The other guy that I have on this list is Terence McKenna. May not have heard the name, but may have heard of the hypothesis that he proposed. It's called the Stoned Ape hypothesis. You ever heard of that one?
I've seen it.
It's the idea. I have this quote from him, which is just a terrible quote. It says, quote, because scientists were unable to explain this tripling of the human brain size in so short a span of evolutionary time, some of the early primate paleontologists and evolutionary theorists predicted and searched for evidence of transitional skeletons. Today, the idea of a missing link has largely been abandoned. Bipedalism, binocular vision, the opposable thumb, the throwing arm, all have been put forth as the key ingredient in the mix that caused self-reflecting humans to crystallize out of the cauldron of competing hominid types and strategies. Yet all we really know is that the shift in brain size was accompanied by remarkable changes in the social organization of the hominids. They became users of tools, fire, and language. They began the process as higher animals and emerged from it 100,000 years ago as conscious, self-aware individuals. Close quote.
And he's suggesting that we did this by throwing the wrong plants on the fire?
Everything he suggested in that is wrong. Like every part of it.
The idea of the missing link being largely abandoned. What? I mean, it bothers me that people are saying, well, how come the missing link is still missing? And I have to answer, how come it hasn't been missing since 1974? What the hell's your problem?
People. I would say in a sense, the missing link concept has been abandoned because that would be great chain of being, which is a misunderstanding of how evolution works. So,
well, not only that, but what Darwin predicted had been discovered.
Yeah, they already had. I believe in his day they just had like Neanderthals, and I think they hadn't even found Homo erectus yet. So they knew about the one Neanderthal, and so Darwin predicted that we were going to have a fossil species that was intermediate between humans and the apes that we know of that are still alive today. Australopithecus afarensis exactly met that criteria. Right.
So that is a no longer missing link. Now, yes, the great chain of being, we know that it's not like Rudy Zallinger's painting, which was a brilliant presentation, but still, deceptive because it put everybody in one line as a chain.
Right.
Say. But it's still, we still can't say that it's a missing link because that was found.
Right. Yeah, it's and more are still found, and we have Silanthropus and Orin, Ardipithecus. We have various species of Australopithecines, and it's.
Don't you love the creationist argument? Well, if it was real, there'd be more than one of them. How many of them does it take to be real? Don't bring up the fact that we have hundreds of them. I think we're up to 400 Australopithecus afarensis, and that's just that one species. And we've got like a dozen other species on top of that, but we've got hundreds of just that one. How many do we have to have for that to have been real? If you find bones, does it mean that there was once meat on them, or were they always just bone?
No, the rocks form directly into fossils.
Yes, Satan buried those bones to test our faith.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you could ask the same thing for anything really. I mean, there are a total of 13 specimens of Archaeopteryx. Does that mean there are only 13 Archaeopteryx in existence ever?
Sometimes they complain that we will find a partial skeleton, right? Like the first Australopithecus didn't have feet. The first one didn't have feet. And so, how do you know that it had feet? It's like there was a handful of times, or there was a handful of Tyrannosaur skeletons that were found. Only Sioux had a head. For a while, there was 6 Tyrannosaur skeletons known. Only one of them had a head. That's the one that's known as Sioux. The other 5, even though there was no skull found, we're pretty sure that when the animal was alive, it had a head.
You probably had a head. Probably. And I think that's the great thing about like bilaterally symmetrical animals. If you find the left femur, you know what the right femur looked like.
You know that it probably had one.
Yeah, it's this guy McKenna proposed this. The Stoned Ape hypothesis, which he proposed back in 1992, basically says...
Is the Stoned Ape the hypothesis or the author?
Why not both? He is an ethnobiologist or ethnobotanist who specializes in like psilocybin and other magic mushrooms, so probably both.
I'm sure he does specialize.
Every time I see like mycologists now, I think, I wonder how many of them specialize too. But
yeah, they didn't call them specialists in my day.
Had a different term for them.
Yeah.
But the idea is so funny. It's that the rapid expansion of our brain, because he doesn't seem to know anything about anthropology, was caused entirely by magic mushrooms that apes found, our ancestors found, and ate those.
That's so much more interesting than hearing that you have a dysfunctional gene for producing jaw muscles coupled with another dysfunction and a tumor suppressor gene that allows encephalization. That's not as interesting. That's why everybody hated in the 19th century, or in the 18th, in the 20th century, early part of the 20th century, everybody hated Darwin's idea because that was natural selection. That meant that you had no control. You don't even know that it's going on because it's not down to the individual. It's a matter of population mechanics. Whereas Lamarck presented an idea where you can take control of your own destiny and your own evolution, and everybody liked that a whole lot more.
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, that's pretty hilarious. You think about, okay, a bunch of chimps got stoned, and that's where consciousness came from.
So it was a whole lot of people a decade or so ago, longer, I think, actually now, that were promoting aquatic ape theory to me.
Actually, that's one of the other ones I have on my list.
All right.
By Alistair Hardy, marine biologist. Yeah, you go ahead.
Did you say Alistair?
Alistair Hardy? Yes.
Okay, well, I was thinking about the little old lady that did the TED Talk. Everybody was referring me to this TED Talk that was done by some little old lady in a chair because she was too old to stand. And she gives this talk about how apes don't have body fat, and apes don't have an ability to hold their breath underwater, and all of these other, and so while she's talking, I'm showing video of fat apes holding their breath underwater. and monkeys also swimming underwater.
Right.
So everything she's saying, just prove with video right there. How the fuck did she get a TED talk out of that?
Was it a TEDx talk?
What might have been. I don't know. It's been a while.
I believe they will like go places and you can like sign up to give a TEDx talk, I think is what it is. But like they have to select you for a TED talk, I think is the process.
Yeah.
But at any rate, they it's wild because she's like, okay, we must be hairless because this is a streamlining effect. So the hair is concentrated on our head because that's what the offspring had to grab onto. Then how do you explain it for the armpits and groin? That doesn't make any sense.
And how are we supposed to believe that we lived completely in the water? Not just that we're near the water a lot,
right?
But that we were like hippopotamuses, that we spend all of our time in the water, except like when we're sleeping, and maybe even then. It's a completely, and this is all to account for a lack of hair, which is better explained by the presence and abundance of sweat glands in a savanna running species, and which doesn't make, and that part of it, the sweat glands and all that, make absolutely no sense in the aquatic environment.
Yeah, no, it every part of her theory just doesn't make sense. We have no adaptations whatsoever. We're not even that streamlined. The animals that are streamlined, the mammals, have basically no hair on them. Hippos have very little hair. Whales have very little hair. We have loads of hair all over us. I mean, I guess maybe they would try to argue, well, we weren't aquatic for long enough, but there are more parsimonious hypotheses like sexual selection that would explain why we only have hair on our heads, or in our pets also.
The only thing I need to refute that is to go swimming. You see how you suck at it?
Right, yeah. We are definitely not evolved for swimming. And further, we know what we were eating. We have like isotopic analyses that can be done on teeth, and so we know. We
know when our ancestors shifted from C3 to C4 plants.
Correct, exactly. And so it's like, no, we weren't eating loads of shellfish and fish, maybe sometimes, but this wasn't our primary staple. So no, it's just bogus.
It goes back to that wanting to make believe something that makes you happy because you just want to believe it, and not wanting to find out what's really true and find out what you believe is wrong. There's the difference. People get upset about anybody fact checking what they want to believe. I saw somebody 2 days ago put their fingers in their ears to block themselves from hearing what I had to say in an argument. 2 days ago. Grown person, right? They want to believe what they want to believe, and that's what they want to believe, and they don't want to believe anything else, so they don't want to hear. It's like that movie that Christopher Reeve was in, Somewhere in Time. If you haven't seen it, quick summary. He falls in love with a picture from somebody that lived 100 years ago. So he goes back to this old hotel that this girl used to live at or work at or whatever. And so he rents a room in this, and he goes in old clothes. So he's wearing clothes from 100 years ago. And he goes to this 100-year-old hotel, and he's going to go meet this woman by convincing himself that this is really 100 years ago, that it's like 1900. He's going to convince himself that it's 1900 or 1895 or whatever the fuck it was.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So he just hypnotizes himself until he absolutely believes it. Because this is what religion is all about. Absolutely believe it, no matter what. And then at some point he meets the girl. He finds himself in 1900 or whatever it was, and he meets the girl. They fall in love. They have a great romance and everything. And then at some point he reaches into his pocket. He's just talking to her. And he pulls out a penny from his own time. And when he sees that the penny says 1979, it yanks him back to his own time. It harshed his buzz. It broke the spell. That's what religion is all about. And not just religion. Political positions are like this too. You want to believe what you want to believe. Don't harsh my buzz. I have this nice fantasy. I like it, and that's what I want. Some people embrace that. I do not.
Yeah. It's I mean that goes, for all of the researchers who in other areas are perfectly respectable. Alan Fiducia has publications in paleoornithology which earned him his fame before he became the band guy, right? Fred Hoyle, Wickrama Singh, they did work in mathematics before they became the space viruses guy. I mean, in one way or another, these guys earned their fame. The guy who did a lot of research on
Richard Owen, full cred
Richard Owens.
On everything that he did before he started misrepresenting science on purpose.
Yeah, one of the guys who did a lot of research on the HIV/AIDS connection started like pushing homeopathy after that. So it's like these.
How do you do studies in HIV/AIDS and believe in homeopathy?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy stuff. But they earned their fame, and then they started pushing bogus stuff, maybe because the fame got to them or they became gullible in their older age. I don't know. But
became old and sodded and evil.
Perhaps.
All right, well, we've been at it 2 hours.
Yes,
almost.
So we should pull the plug on this. I want to thank you for coming on. This was a really good idea for a chat, and I'm glad we had this conversation. This was fun.
You should have given me an idea of how many scientists, because I thought we were going to go 1 hour. So I pull a half a dozen, you pull a half a dozen. I figured it'd be an hour.
What's funny is I didn't I wasn't like going like all out on this. These were kind of the first things that came to mind. I was like, well, what are a couple just wacky ideas in science I'm familiar with? I'll jot those down. I wasn't like these are just some of the ones I've come across over the past couple of years. Not like, all right, what's something real crazy that no one's ever heard of before that we're gonna find?
Yeah, I hope I didn't do that to you with the two that I pulled up. I pulled up two that I knew were relatively obscure, but that personally irritated me.
No, those are good examples. Yeah. They're very good examples. Yeah.
All right. Well, this was fun. I enjoyed being on.
Well, thank you. You're always welcome on again. And thank you, Peter, for hosting it. As always, we are indebted to you. And I guess we can pull the plug.
You're welcome, as always. I'll take us out.
Okay.